big fan of change and transition, but you know what is necessary and has a lot of that? Relationships with people. Whenever I've talked about this with people, they're like, well, you like insects. Don't insects go through a lot of change? Yes, but it's predictable. Do butterflies go through a lot of change? Yes, but I know when and how long between transitions. You can't do that with humans. For example, I love my brother. He's my best friend in the whole world. But every time we went through like a new stage of life, it freaked me out. And I was like, oh my gosh, I don't know what's happening. Is the relationship ending? No, the relationship didn't end. It just turns out we were adults now and couldn't exactly watch our pet Black Widow for hours. It is helpful to recognize this pattern because I can give myself time being like, oh, the relationship is just shifting what it looks like. But it throws me off every time.
Pro tip, carry one of Target's weighted dinosaur plushies around while shopping to help overstimulation and anxiety.
Just a friendly little PSA, because I'm seeing a lot of people getting confused by this. Being on the spectrum equals autistic. The spectrum is the autism spectrum disorder, also known as ASD, also known as autism. So it's not possible for someone to be on the spectrum and not be autistic. I also see a lot of people being like, oh, I think I'm a little bit on the spectrum, but I don't know that I'm fully autistic. That is a huge misconception because it's not possible for somebody to just be a little bit autistic. Everyone who is on the autism spectrum is 100% autistic 100% of the time. It's just likely that if somebody doesn't present as, stereotypically autistic, they are highly skilled at masking. I've masked my entire life, which means that I didn't know that I was autistic until I was 27 years old. But what I didn't realize was that it doesn't matter whether you look or seem autistic, it's about what's happening in your mind. So regardless of the fact that I'm good at making eye contact, I am still painfully aware of the fact that I'm making eye contact. I'm worrying about whether I'm making too much eye contact. I'm worrying about whether or not I should look away. You're not seeing any of that processing happening externally, but that's happening in my mind. That doesn't mean I'm any less autistic. And the other thing that I'm realizing is that as I'm figuring out the process of unmasking, as I'm starting to seem more autistic in certain situations, that doesn't make me more autistic than I was before. It is a constant. So all of this to say, when someone tells you that they're autistic, if someone's been diagnosed or they've done their research and they're self-diagnosing, it's not cool to try to question these people, tell them their lived experience without having any understanding of what it's like to be them. Just believe them.
You know the stats on autistics, like the percentage that work and don't work? I reckon they're probably very flawed because when you think about the autistic people that are working, well, maybe they are autistic people who can work, therefore they are not incentivized or motivated to go and get diagnosed because they don't need supports. So you probably do have a higher proportion of autistic people that do work. They're just the autistic people that are a bit quirky or maybe are privileged enough to be able to survive within their workplace and don't need to get diagnosed. And I think it's important to have like accuracy in statistics because I guess it, knowing that there potentially are more autistic people working means that there are some circumstances that allow us to work. What are they?
So we know how only roughly 15% of autistic people are employed, and other autistic people are like, oh my gosh, how are you guys doing it? Like, how do you function? So I am employed. I'm sort of part-time-ish. I work a couple days each week for a couple hours each shift, and yeah, it's not okay. I'm not okay. Before I found out I was autistic, I would literally work a 3 or 4 hour shift, and I would come back home and I would be absolutely exhausted. I literally felt dead, and I did not want to do anything until the next day. And I would tell people, I would talk to people and be like, I'm not even exaggerating, I feel like I just completed a triathlon. But I only worked a few hours, but I legitimately feel like I just completed a triathlon. That's how absolutely mentally, physically, and emotionally exhausted I am. And I always felt really dramatic for that. I always was like, I don't know, because people around me or my partners and stuff are capable of working 8 hours a day, 40 hours a week, and my mind could not comprehend how people were doing that because I found 4 hours the most difficult thing ever. But yeah, working is really difficult, and yeah, we're not doing okay.
I'll give you 3 reasons. 1, she's a female. 2, she's not a boy. And 3, and most importantly, she's a girl!
One of the autistic traits that I feel really doesn't get talked about enough on here is nesting. Nesting is where you, in your bed, make a little nest, whether that's with pillows, blankets, stuffed animals, plushies, whatever. I used to always do this whenever I was a kid, like, this is the most autistic thing ever, but I would line up my plushies all around the perimeter of my bed and then just be like in the middle. Like, I've started picking that back up again and nesting again, and it's made me so much more cozy and feel safe and just happy overall.
Having autism is weird as fuck. People will bully the hell out of us and then say that we don't understand social cues. Having a strong sense of justice is listed as a trait of autism as though it's a bad thing. Having sensory issues, being overly sensitive to certain sounds, textures, temperatures, all of these things is somehow considered weird. Meanwhile, people completely disregard the fact that many humans are clearly desensitized to outer stimuli, especially in cities where there's cars rushing by, horns honking, people often yelling or screaming, so many noises and smells, but somehow me being aware that that puts my body into survival mode and knowing that I need to make an accommodation in order to relax is seen as like a problem and not as a survival skill. If we ever have an apocalypse, I'm sure it'll come in handy that I can hear what people are saying in a parking lot outside my window, even though the window is closed, that I have smelled things burning 10 minutes before other people do, to the point where they're completely denying it. Even recently, I was in a studio session. The producer was playing the beat extremely loud. I still heard the food delivery guy knock on the door. Nobody else heard it. I mentioned it. They said no way. Sure enough, they went and looked, and guess what was there? The fucking food sitting outside. Yeah, being able to hear things like that is extremely overstimulating sometimes, and yeah, I might need noise-canceling headphones once in a while. But I've written languages. I started reading encyclopedias when I was in 2nd grade. Somehow it's a problem that we miss the nuance of social lies, like saying that something is fine when it's clearly not, instead of just asking the person you're speaking to if they have the space to talk about it. Or I'm annoying if I want to talk things through until I'm sure that the person I'm speaking with understands what I'm saying, and vice versa, because I want to solve things efficiently. I actually want to solve problems instead of just basking in the ego and letting the problem be a problem. I've been bullied by neurotypical people for the way that I feel joy, because it expresses through my body, and I had to learn how to hold it back and cover it up. And to me, it's common sense to just be kind to people, but somehow their brain works better than mine. It seems more like people with autism mainly struggle because we're in a society that's not built for us. Accommodations that we need just aren't accessible, or we get made fun of for them. People assume that we're childish, or they assume that there's nothing going on in our heads if we're during a time period where we're nonverbal, or if we're always nonverbal. If we're high masking, then we're not considered autistic enough. Then we're told that everybody's on the spectrum. But if everyone were in the spectrum, it wouldn't be so damn hard to be autistic in this society. I'm looked at as a fucking weirdo if I feel more comfortable sitting on the ground with my back to the wall and my legs crossed, or seen as attention-seeking when that's genuinely just the most comfortable thing for me. I've been made fun of for stimming, but it's just a part of being autistic. Meanwhile, in an emergency, neurotypical people feel fear when they smell fear sweat from individuals around them. But for people with autism, it's the opposite. So we have crippling anxiety because we feel fear when we smell calm sweat. But in an emergency, we feel calm when we smell fear sweat. Sweat coming from an individual that feels fear. And then we're somehow seen as heartless or demented if we're fully capable of keeping our cool during something extremely tragic, violent, or graphic. But it really just points to us being descendants of hunters.
I've never felt like this before. Honey, honey.
Hey, buddy! Squidward! Free cleaning service? Census taker? Good day, kind sir. Would you like to buy some Girl Scout cookies?
This might be a shocker to some people, but the autism spectrum doesn't go from not autistic to the most autistic. On top of that, everyone who is on the spectrum is 100% autistic. A neurotype, it's not something that you have just a little bit of. It informs your brain and body's entire way of processing and living through this world. And when people refer to the autism spectrum, they actually mean this. This is a pie chart that indicates different levels of autistic traits, support needs, and individual experiences that autistic people have. Now, the reason why some people might seem more autistic or have more glaringly obvious autistic traits might depend on those support needs, but it might also depend on whether or not those people are masking. So I am autistic. I am also a highly masked autistic, which means that I grew up subconsciously hiding all of my autistic traits as a way to fit in, as a way to feel comfortable and safe in social situations with neurotypical people. But just because my autism doesn't impact you when I'm masking doesn't mean that I'm any less autistic. And on the flip side, when I unmask, when I show more stereotypical autistic traits, that doesn't make me more autistic. Because it's not about behavior, it's about what's happening in my brain. It's about the way that my brain processes information. It's about the way that I engage in social interactions and the way that I feel in my body that makes me autistic. So no, every single person is not on the autism spectrum. And if you are on that spectrum, you are autistic.
This is my dinner. I call it autism dinner. Autism dinner!
I made communication cards. They're supposed to help aid in communication in moments when out loud verbal communication isn't really an option. I'm partially nonverbal autistic, and I know it can be really frustrating when you can't get across the message that you want to, but I also wanted to make an option to help with that was still aesthetic. I hope you guys like it. Bye, friends.
And every time he leave me alone, he always tell me he miss it. He wanna
Can you believe this person is claiming AI is racist? It is. Ableist too. Prove it. Okay, let's ask it to generate an autistic person. So, and let's do it again. And once more. And again. And then, and how about, are we starting to see a pattern? You seem to think you're proving something. Here's more. And more. And some more. And how about this? And another one. More. 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 More, 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 more. Do you see any diversity, say race, gender, age? Oh. Plus, most were skinny and, weirdly enough, a disproportionate abundance of red hair. How many did you do until you gave up after more than 100? And the closer you look, you start to notice other trends, like, were any of them smiling? It was all moody, melancholy, depressing. I noticed you used lifelike, photoreal, and photojournalism in your prompts. When I didn't include those, I'd get puzzle pieces in everything. Some of these are cartoons, others are whatever this is. Ugh. So, AI is racist, sexist, ageist, and not only ableist, but uses harmful puzzle imagery from hate groups like Autism Speaks. Why? The AI we have today is not artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence doesn't exist yet. This is just machine learning. Now, here's a bit of an oversimplification, but this machine learning focuses on patterns. It looks for the majority of similarities and then excludes outliers. So if the data that it's accessing is mostly young white boys in this case, it will amplify that bias. So are you saying that in order for AI to be an effective tool, you have to be smarter than the AI? Scary thought, huh? For someone who is looking to confirm their biases or is unaware of their subconscious bias, it becomes a tool of the oppressor. I think plagiarism software, machine learning, AI, has a lot of potential to do good, especially for the disabled population, but we must be aware of its limitations and pitfalls. And probably some government regulation is in order, at the very least, to stop these companies from profiteering off of artists' work without compensating those artists. In the 148 images I generated, Midjourney depicted an autistic person as being female presenting twice, as older than 30 5 times, as white 100% of the time, and 0 were smiling.